This is Newsmax TV. I'm Ashley Martella. We're happy to be joined again by Minnesota U.S. Representative Michele Bachmann. Welcome back, Representative.
Hi, Ashley. It's great to be back. Thank you.
You're concerned that the Obama administration might use the $20 billion escrow fund that BP set up as an ATM card, and you say the payout should not become political. What is at the root of your concern?
Well, I think the root of the concern is the last 18 months we've observed the federal government walk in and take over GM, Chrysler, the two largest car dealerships in the United States, AIG, the largest insurance company. The federal government also took over the largest banks, Bank of America, Citibank, all of those private industries the federal government still controls or has an equity interest in. They've also taken over the student loan industry and Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, which means the federal government today owns over 50% of all private home mortgages. And then we saw the federal government take over the healthcare industry, and now the president is talking about taking over the oil industry with the cap and trade national energy tax. So all of this means that the federal government has been very prone toward putting its fingers into private industry. My concern, BP has made a good decision by admitting their guilt. They do have guilt in this situation. They've admitted it. And I think it's important that they do pay for every claim that is legitimate and based down in the Gulf region. They need to do that. But at the same time, I'm concerned about politicizing the fund to make sure that this fund isn't used for special interests that would be of the president's choosing. We already had a system set up for claims that BP could have gone into and that claimants could have gone to, where they wouldn't have had to have access and pay for legal fees. They just could have gone into that system. But the president has bypassed that, set up a new system that is run by the administration as opposed to the court system. And I'm just concerned that politics does not come into play, because this will be a very costly cleanup. There are people whose lives are ruined because of this oil spill. They legitimately need to be paid quickly and paid completely to be made whole. But at the same time, I just think that because we've seen so much in the last 18 months of the federal government getting involved in private industry, I just want to make sure that it's legitimate claims that are being paid to real people by BP, and I'm concerned about the administration's impact in all of this.
All right, you mentioned the government takeover of the car companies, banks, a student loan program, and so forth. Are you afraid that Obama might be out to take over the oil companies?
Oh, most certainly, because of the cap and trade bill. The cap and trade bill is one that will effectively, in Minnesota, for my constituents, will mean a doubling of our energy bills. When the federal government calls all of the shots, then either, whether it's an equity interest in the business or whether it's through control, the federal government effectively runs that company. So I am very, very concerned about the federal government not regulating for safety's sake. That's a good thing. But when they regulate to the point of effectively owning the business, that's going too far.
On another subject, you recently wrote on the Hill that Obama's trying to sell a disastrous policy with his health care law, and one of the most controversial elements of it is the mandate that everyone must purchase health insurance or pay a hefty fine. Yet Democrats defeated a Republican attempt to repeal that mandate this week. Are Democrats not getting the message that a majority of voters favor repeal of the entire law?
Exactly. They don't have that message at all. And yet 2/3 of the American people want the Obamacare repealed 100%, lock, stock, and barrel. And I was the first member of Congress to file a full-scale repeal of Obamacare. My bill is 4903. People can find it at michelebachmann.com. I would invite them to come and sign my petition, forward it to their friends, and urge other members of Congress to sign on to 4903, the full repeal of Obamacare. And we can do this. I firmly believe that if we have conservatives take control this fall, which is only 4.5 months away, and it's very likely this could happen, we can defund Obamacare after 2010 election. And I absolutely believe President Obama is a one-term president. Then we need to elect a very strong constitutional conservative who will be bold and who will run on repealing Obamacare. And then we can repeal it in February of 2013 and actually address the cost issues, which are the real focus of Americans' concern.
Representative Bachmann, you are a Tea Party favorite yourself. How does that help your re-election campaign?
Well, people who are part of the Tea Party really are all about our basic American values. They believe in fiscal restraint, limited constitutional government, and they believe we're taxed enough already. That's a huge majority of Americans. That takes into account disaffected Democrats, independents, Republicans of all stripes, libertarians, Constitution Party. That's a huge swath of America. That's why I think we see the liberal media and also the far left-wing Democrats dissing Tea Party adherents, because they know this is the energy in America right now, because people have absolutely flatly rejected the Obama-Pelosi agenda, and that's really what the Tea Party is about. It's this amalgamation of people who formerly considered themselves Democrats, who want nothing to do with this out-of-control spending, because they truly do love the country and they want to see us get back to our foundational constitutional underpinnings. That's a very good thing for all of us.
All right, briefly tapping into your background in finance and such, the financial reform legislation does nothing to rein in Fannie and Freddie, which were major culprits in the housing collapse. There's also talk that both agencies are about to dip into the public trough again. What's going on there, and why can't this problem be addressed?
Well, Barney Frank and Chris Dodd are the two in charge of this bill on financial reform, together with Tim Geithner. And they love big government. They love all things big government. And they want to make sure that they have basically a welfare program for every American and that we're all on it, because they have a very different view of America. Unfortunately, the bill that is coming through will make bailouts perpetual. And here's the kicker. Now the bailouts would only be in the president's hands to give a bailout to whoever his politically connected favorite friend is, and they would bypass Congress. So no longer would Congress have to vote on bailouts. That's how bad this bill is. And if you look at the financial meltdown, one book I'd recommend is Architects of Ruin by Peter Schweitzer. If you look at the problem, all roads lead to Freddie and Fannie. The government created this problem with the economy. And so now Barney Frank and Chris Dodd want to institutionalize the very problem that got us into the mess that we're in. That's why I firmly believe, Ashley, that the American people are so smart, they're going to clean house this fall, and we're going to have a tremendous change election.
Obama once promised that no couple making under $250,000 a year would pay a dime more in federal taxes. Considering the way Congress is spending money, is that a promise Obama will be able to keep?
No, he's already broken that promise. There's already taxes that have gone up under Barack Obama. And we're going to see a major tax increase come January 1st of 2011, when all these new taxes go into place for so many different people across the board, including people making under $250,000. Because many, many people are invested in their pension plans or mutual funds, and those mutual funds will have an increase in the taxes on those dividend payments. So he's already broken his promise on not taxing people under $250,000, as well as the health care bill. The health care bill is a huge tax on Americans of all stripes, from senior citizens to people serving in our military to young people. Across the board, people will pay huge new taxes because of just the health care bill alone, let alone if the president gets his way on cap and trade. This is the only thing that the president knows, is to raise taxes, grow the size of government, and we see the inefficiency that goes along with that. All we have to do, Ashley, is look at how the federal government has miserably failed in capping this hole in the Gulf region. And when we see how miserable the government response has been on this disaster, then consider these are the people who will now be in charge of our health care. Do we really, when we find out we're diagnosed with pancreatic cancer, want to put our lives in the hands of the people running this BP disaster cleanup? This is not what we want to do.
The Senate this week rejected a $140 billion tax and spend package, which was a major defeat for Harry Reid and President Obama. 11 Democrats joined 40 Republicans in voting it down. Do you think this is an indication that the mood might be changing at least a bit on Capitol Hill?
I think it is. Also, the president, as you know, put out a letter Saturday evening requesting an additional $50 billion in stimulus. Now, remember, the president's already gotten close to $1 trillion in stimulus. That's been an abject failure. He promised unemployment wouldn't rise above 8%. It's been hovering around 10%. He promised us we'd create 4 million jobs. We lost 4 million jobs, so that's a net loss of 8 million jobs total from what he promised us would happen. And so now he wants an additional 50 billion. I say no dice, Mr. President. If you couldn't stimulate the economy with $1 trillion, I don't think 50 billion more in borrowed money that we will have to put on the backs of our children to pay back, I don't think that you need to have that. Because after all, he's told us, Ashley, what he intends to do with that $50 billion. He wants to bail out more government. It's one thing when the private sector loses jobs. He's not crying crocodile tears about that. It's another when government employees lose jobs. Then he gets engaged, and then he wants an additional $50 billion. But we know now that federal government employees make, on average, double what their counterparts make in the private sector when you combine the wage and benefit package. It's $120,000 for government employees at the federal level versus their private sector counterparts in the private sector. So I had introduced a measure that would cap salary increases for federal employees and for members of Congress. Unfortunately, Nancy Pelosi and the Democrats that run Congress rejected my measure just to freeze the growth of salaries for government employees. So if they can't even freeze the growth of government, I don't think they can be trusted to actually do what needs to be done to get our economy back in order.
Minnesota U.S. Representative Michele Bachmann, as always, thanks so much for talking with us.
Thank you, Ashley.
And thank you for watching Newsmax TV.